The small town of Eldwood had always been a quiet, unassuming place, nestled at the edge of a dense forest known as the Whispering Woods. The name came from the eerie sounds that seemed to emanate from the trees, soft murmurs that locals swore sounded like voices. Most dismissed it as the wind weaving through the branches, but the older folks told darker tales. They spoke of people who ventured into the woods and never returned, of secrets buried beneath the roots, and of a presence that guarded its domain with deadly intent. Clara Bennett, a 28-year-old journalist with a penchant for uncovering hidden truths, arrived in Eldwood on a chilly October morning. She'd heard the legends of the Whispering Woods through a podcast and saw an opportunity for a gripping story, one that might finally earn her the recognition she craved at her struggling online magazine. Armed with a notebook, a recorder, and a healthy dose of skepticism, Clara checked into the town's only inn, a creaky building run by a gruff woman named Marjorie. "You're here for the woods, aren't you?" Marjorie asked, her eyes narrowing as she handed Clara the key to her room. Clara nodded, forcing a smile. "Just doing some research for a story." Marjorie's expression darkened. "Folks round here don't take kindly to outsiders poking into those woods. They're cursed, you know. Been that way since the witch trials in the 1600s. They say the spirits of the accused still linger, whispering their grievances to anyone foolish enough to listen." Clara chuckled, brushing off the warning. "I'll keep that in mind, but I'm more interested in facts than ghost stories." Marjorie shook her head, muttering under her breath as Clara headed to her room. That evening, Clara visited the local diner, hoping to gather some leads. The townsfolk were tight-lipped, their glances uneasy whenever she mentioned the Whispering Woods. But one man, an elderly regular named Tom, finally spoke up after his third cup of coffee. "There's a reason people avoid those woods," he said, his voice low. "Back in '82, a group of kids went in there on a dare. Only one came back, little Ellie Harper. She was half mad, babbling about voices and shadows that moved on their own. Her brother and the others, they were never found. Sheriff at the time searched for weeks, but it was like the forest swallowed them whole." Clara leaned forward, her curiosity piqued. "What happened to Ellie?" Tom's eyes clouded over. "She never recovered. Kept saying the woods wanted something from her, some kind of payment. She took her own life a year later. Left a note that just said, 'They won't stop whispering.'" A chill ran down Clara's spine, but she pushed it aside. She thanked Tom and spent the rest of the evening reviewing her notes. The story was taking shape, a mix of historical mystery and modern tragedy. All she needed was a first-hand look at the woods to round out her piece. The next morning, Clara drove to the edge of the Whispering Woods. The trees loomed tall and gnarled, their branches twisting into shapes that seemed almost human in the early light. A faint mist clung to the ground, and the air was unnaturally still. As she stepped out of her car, she heard a soft, unintelligible murmur, like a crowd of voices speaking just out of earshot. She shook her head, chalking it up to her imagination, and started down a narrow path. The deeper she ventured, the louder the whispers grew. They seemed to come from every direction, weaving through the trees like a living thing. Clara's recorder picked up the sound, a faint hum that made her skin crawl. She stopped to take a few photos, her camera clicking in the eerie silence. That's when she noticed the carvings, dozens of symbols etched into the bark of the trees. They looked ancient, a mix of spirals and jagged lines that formed a pattern she couldn't decipher. As she reached a small clearing, the whispers suddenly stopped. The silence was deafening, broken only by the sound of her own breathing. In the center of the clearing stood a stone, weathered and covered in moss, with more of the strange symbols carved into its surface. Clara knelt to examine it, brushing away the moss to reveal a single word: "Beware." Her heart raced, but she forced herself to stay calm. She snapped a photo of the stone and stood, ready to head back, when she heard a twig snap behind her. She spun around, but no one was there. The whispers returned, louder this time, and more distinct. She could almost make out words now: leave, now, or stay, forever. Clara's rational mind screamed at her to run, but her journalist's instinct urged her to stay. She followed the sound of the whispers, her footsteps crunching on the forest floor. The path led her to a hollow tree, its trunk wide enough for a person to fit inside. Inside the hollow, she found a small, leather-bound journal, its pages yellowed with age. The writing was frantic, the ink smudged in places, but she could make out a few lines. They won't let me leave. The whispers, they know my name. I thought I could escape, but the woods, they demand a price. Blood for blood. If you find this, run. Don't look back. Clara's hands trembled as she stuffed the journal into her bag. The whispers were all around her now, a cacophony of voices that seemed to press in on her from every side. She turned to leave, but the path she'd taken was gone. The trees seemed to have shifted, closing in around her like a living cage. Panic set in as she stumbled through the underbrush, the whispers growing into a deafening roar. Hours passed, or maybe it was minutes. Time seemed to warp in the woods. Clara's phone had no signal, and her compass spun uselessly. She was lost, and the whispers were relentless, now chanting her name in a haunting rhythm. Clara, Clara, Clara. Just when she thought she couldn't take it anymore, she stumbled into another clearing. In the center was a circle of stones, each one marked with the same symbols she'd seen before. And in the middle of the circle lay a pile of bones, human bones, weathered and scattered, some still bearing scraps of decayed clothing. Clara's stomach churned as she realized she was standing in a graveyard, one that had never been documented. The whispers reached a crescendo, and Clara felt a cold hand brush against her neck. She screamed, spinning around, but there was nothing there, only the trees, their branches swaying as if alive. The air grew heavy, and the ground beneath her feet began to tremble. She ran, her legs burning, her heart pounding in her chest. The woods seemed to fight her every step, roots snagging at her ankles, branches clawing at her arms. Finally, she burst out of the forest, collapsing onto the grass at the edge of the whispering woods. Her car was still there, untouched, as if nothing had happened. But Clara knew better. She could still hear the whispers, faint now, but ever present, like a scar on her mind. Back at the inn, Clara packed her things and left Eldwood without saying a word. She never published her story. The journal, the photos, the recordings, they all stayed locked away in a box she never opened again. But the whispers followed her, a constant reminder of the deadly secret she'd uncovered in the whispering woods. Some nights, when the world was quiet, she could still hear them calling her name, beckoning her to return. And deep in the woods, the trees stood silent, waiting for the next curious soul to step into their embrace.